Amid the smoke and embers, the streets were alive with terror. Citizens, their faces smudged with ash, rushed in every direction, eyes wide and frantic. The heat of the flames could be felt even from across the square, curling around the pillars and walls, threatening to unleash itself on the city. The once proud theatre, commissioned by Pompeius Magnus, a place of culture, of entertainment and of art, was now an inferno. Its once mighty walls, cracked and crumbling, sagged beneath the relentless heat. Shouts of panic rose from the crowd, mingled with the desperate cries of those still trapped inside, helpless against the fire's wrath. All eyes were fixed on the flames, licking the edges of the seats, the dark smoke curling upwards into the sky, black as pitch. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning timber and the stench of fear. "We need water!" came shouts from the throng. But the efforts of the vigiles, the firefighting force of freedmen created by Augustus, were sluggish, their efforts swallowed by the flames. Citizens pushed against one another, stumbling in their haste to escape as the fire quickly spread, flicking at the walls of nearby buildings and threatening to consume the whole of the Campus Martius. Then, cutting through the roar of the fire and the panicked cries, came the steady, unyielding rhythm of marching boots. The Praetorian Guard arrived in full force. At their head strode their prefect, Lucius Aelius Sejanus. With unshakable discipline and precise movements that stood in stark contrast to the chaos, the Praetorian soldiers moved swiftly through the crowd. Forming a barrier between the fire and the panicked citizens, the Praetorians cleared paths, ensuring more buckets of water reached the blaze without being lost to the stampede of terrified citizens. Sejanus stepped forward, the heat of the flames searing on his face. He scanned the scene, assessing the chaos with sharp precision. Gesturing to a group of soldiers, Sejanus ordered them into the theatre to search for survivors. Then his gaze settled on the vigiles, struggling in vain, their water supply woefully insufficient. With a quick motion, Sejanus ordered a detachment of Praetorians to help them carry water from the city's fountains, bolstering the vigiles' failed efforts. After hours of struggle, the fire was finally brought under control, though the damage was already done. Pompey's theatre stood in ruins, its pillars blackened and crumbling. As the smoke thinned, the shaken crowds began drifting away. Sejanus remained, standing tall amid the lingering smoke, surveying the devastation. As they departed, grateful citizens clapped Sejanus on the back. Thanks to him, their homes had been spared. Lucius Aelius Sejanus was a hero. The accolades from his role in containing the fire at Pompey's theatre were yet another sign that Sejanus's family's name was on the rise. Sejanus was not only the sole prefect of the Praetorian Guard, a force 12,000 strong, but he had also expanded the Praetorian cohorts from 9 to 12 and stationed one cohort permanently around Tiberius's palatial villa to guard the imperial family. Although he was an equestrian and held no formal role within the Senate, Sejanus's influence had grown unexpectedly during Tiberius's extended absence from Rome. As the Pater Patriae travelled between Rhodes and Capri, avoiding the backlash that had followed Germanicus's death, Sejanus was increasingly seen as Tiberius's eyes and ears, especially by the equestrian members of the Senate who came to him over Castor, the heir apparent. Sejanus had even managed to negotiate an imperial marriage alliance with the house of Germanicus, a match far above his station and one that would have been unnecessary had Tiberius remained in Rome. Though Drusillus, the son of Claudius to whom Sejanus's daughter was betrothed, had died of accidental asphyxiation, the alliance between the Praetorian Guard and Germanicus's former legions on the Rhine had already been established. Another marriage might be needed to solidify this bond, and with his sons Strabo and Capito, Sejanus had options. The daughters of Germanicus, Julia Agrippinilla, Julia Drusilla, and Julia Livilla, were not yet betrothed. And for that matter, Germanicus's widow, Agrippina, whose mourning period had ended, would soon have suitors eager to raise the sons of Germanicus. Why shouldn't one of them be Sejanus? His rising popularity after the fire could complement the undying admiration the people held for the family of Germanicus. And his wife Apicata, the daughter of a mere equestrian gourmand, could easily be set aside in favor of an imperial marriage to Agrippina, the granddaughter of the god Augustus. But even if Sejanus could secure such an alliance, Castor remained a problem. He was Tiberius's legitimate son, a pure Claudian. While the Senate's equestrian members increasingly turned to Sejanus, the elite patrician senators favored Castor, who resented that a man of such low birth should wield so much power within the government, to the exclusion of the princeps's own son. This widening gulf between tradition and power was not unique to Castor, who believed his patrician birthright outweighed that of a low-born man, even though that man commanded 12,000 soldiers stationed just outside the city walls. Even within the Senate, a political battle raged between traditional authority, family auctoritas, and immediate influence, personal and political dignitas. One such clash had unfolded in the theatre. Lucius Cornelius Sulla Felix, a descendant of the famed dictator who had won Rome's first civil war, refused to yield his seat to Gnaeus Domitius Corbulo, a rising magistrate entitled to special seating by virtue of his office. Sulla, a young man who also claimed descent from Pompeius Magnus, sat confidently, believing his lineage alone entitled him to special treatment. Corbulo, a magistrate from a senatorial family that had risen under the influence of Tiberius's mother, the Augusta, insisted the seat was his by right of office. The dispute soon divided the Senate. Mamercus Aemilius Scaurus, husband of the exiled Aemilia Lepida, and Lucius Arruntius, both from the patrician Aemilii branch, backed Sulla, while those who upheld the seating laws established by Augustus sided with Corbulo. Before long, the patrician senators called upon Castor to adjudicate the matter, an unsurprising choice given his own patrician status. In response, the equestrian senators, acting through Sejanus, pushed for a written ruling from Tiberius, who had consistently upheld the laws established by Augustus. But Tiberius remained silent. In the end, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, Mamercus Aemilius Scaurus, and Lucius Arruntius formally apologized to Corbulo, conceding that Sulla's lineage alone did not entitle him to special seating, thereby upholding the Augustan laws. Then, during yet another trial over which Castor presided, something unexpected occurred. After nearly 20 months away, Tiberius Caesar finally returned to Rome. The case was brought before the Senate by Gaius Cestius Gallus, who accused a woman named Annia Rufilla of abusing him, only for her to then escape justice by fleeing to a statue of the emperor and clutching it for protection. Since the matter touched upon imperial authority, the Senate deemed it fitting that only a member of the imperial family could pass judgment. Once again, they turned to Castor. Following Gallus's lead, the Senate pressured Castor until he finally summoned Annia Rufilla. She was taken into custody and thrown into the Mamertine prison. But Tiberius was not pleased with this outcome. Not only did he remove Castor from the bench, but he publicly chastised Gaius Cestius Gallus, whose alleged innocence was questionable given the depths of depravity Tiberius knew him capable of. Perhaps Annia Rufilla had spoken some truth, giving her every right to claim political asylum at an imperial statue. In any case, it was no more appropriate for Castor to oversee this trial than it had been for him to adjudicate the case of the poet Clutorius Priscus. These should have been handled solely by the senators. Though criticized by Tiberius before the Senate, Gallus was undeterred, afterwards extending a dinner invitation to the princeps to celebrate his return to Rome, an invitation which Tiberius eagerly accepted, on the condition that Gallus's party adhere to its traditional routine. The serving girls would be naked. Tiberius, standing before the Senate, then made another motion. For his role in suppressing the fire in the theatre of Pompey, a statue of Lucius Aelius Sejanus was to be commissioned and erected in the reconstructed theatre. What better way for Tiberius to show his gratitude to the man he claimed was now the partner of his labours? The Senate wholeheartedly voted in favour of this honour, thus improving Sejanus's standing in Rome a little bit more. But that wasn't Tiberius's only motion. He also requested the Senate grant to Castor the tribunicia potestas, formally recognizing him as the heir to both Tiberius and to Rome's military power. Before Castor, only Marcus Agrippa and Tiberius himself had held this tribunician power. Even Germanicus, at the height of his career, had not been granted this honor. Truly, Castor was poised to become Rome's next emperor. This news was a potential threat to Sejanus, whose own ambitions would be crushed the moment Castor ascended to the purple. Furthermore, Sejanus could hardly imagine that such a decree would sit well with the widow of Germanicus, whose son would now slip even further from the line of succession. Perhaps it was time for Sejanus to explore the possibility of an alliance with Agrippina. Not in opposition to Tiberius himself, but against the future principate of Castor.